can you describe then for, say, students today,
Hmm.
I think it's hard all again for them to completely understand. Like I can remember what the arguments were like at my dinner table over the Vietnam War.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
somehow just spilled into the Watergate stuff, you know? I mean,
Yeah. Right.
um, can you describe, so the way you're talking about those faculty debates is that it
Hmm.
just never resolved. It was
Right.
just this tension constantly.
I think that gap between my country, right or wrong, and no, how would you put it? My country, right or wrong, and oh God, how would you express the opposite side of that? Um, and
One, two,
hell
three,
no,
four. We don't
and
want your effing
yeah,
wars.
and hell no, I won't go.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, or 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your effing war. I think the gap between that was monumental. Um, and if you remember, I remember walking down on I think it was after the Kent State, the huge gathering in the mall after the Kent State shootings. And there'd been the night before, on the Friday night, the weathermen had been marauding around Scott Circle and DuPont Circle. And there were no buses because all the buses were surrounding the White House,
Right.
DC School Transit. And I walked down Massachusetts Avenue, and there were, at Scott Circle, at all the radials at Scott and DuPont Circle, there were Army Jeeps with four soldiers in them, all with cradling automatic semi-machine guns basically in their lap and just staring at you as you walked along. I mean, it was just, and you had to go through that experience. You had to walk down to the mall and see the rooftops covered with sniper rifles, the guys with sniper rifles. You had to go through that, I think, to understand and be tear gassed, to understand just the divide in America was so huge. The barber shop that I used to go to down Wisconsin, I put up a sign said, love your country or get your, and then a donkey out of here, that kind of thing. That thing was just so common. And after the Kent State shootings, all these people, these kids who went home, broken by the whole thing, and
Mhm.
their parents wouldn't let them in the door. They said, you're not our son anymore. If you can't. And it happened time and time and time again. And the people who wrote letters to the wounded, and that Dean Kaler, who has never walked since that day. And one kid who was killed, who'd been an ROTC student, he just happened to be walking in the parking lot. And people wrote the ugliest letters to these families and said, are you only communist, good communist, a dead communist, had nothing to do with communism at all. It just, and
Yeah.
I think that is parallel to our own time in a very, very scary way. The divisiveness was overwhelming. And there were these people who were coming off in their defense. They'd fought in the Korean War, they'd fought in the Second World War. They were the silent generation, as they were called,
Mhm.
but they'd done, they'd fought for the country, and I can see why they were reluctant to do that. And people were taking dope, smoking dope, they're running around, burning their draft cards and burning their bras and everything else, and so it seemed like just pure revolution.
Mhm.
But it's it's almost impossible. Well, I think it is possible once again to conceive of that, but it was impossible to conceive it for many years afterwards. I mean, that anti-war movement absolutely died with 1975. It died with Kent State to begin with, I think. But it continued to die through the 70s, early 70s.
Why do you say 1975? Was there something in mind?
Well, roughly the end of the war,
Right.
the last troops home, all that. So roughly about that time. And then the army was, of course, a complete mess for about 10
Right.
years after that.
Well, and then we did the hard swing of, not that long afterward to Reagan.
To Reaganism, yes, yeah, yeah. The But Reaganism at least seemed to have a soul of some kind. I know there's some questions about that, but there
Such a
seems
good
to be no
story.
soul in today's Republican Party at all. Yeah, that's it.
Completely. So, okay, so
Yeah.
thank you for that. That was perfect, actually,
Okay.
describing that. How do we get out of that?
How do we get out of it? Boy.
I,
Um,
if the system worked
yeah.
eventually, and
Mhm.
well, let me tell you what I think, but then I want to hear what you think.
Yeah.
How do we
Yeah.
get out of that? Because you have a better perspective and more personal. I was still really young at that point, and yeah, and uh, I was really struck in doing the research how the Republican Party listened.
Yes. Yeah.
Watergate, they listened to the facts.
Mhm.
And then, of course, famously, Senator Goldwater, Mr. Arch Conservative himself, went and told Nixon that he had to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's quoted as saying, there are only so many lies you can take.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, John Dean told me, which was a really interesting thing. Maybe I'd known, but I didn't remember, is that he and Barry Goldwater Jr. were really close
Oh,
friends.
were they? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
before he went to testify, he went to talk to Senator Goldwater out of respect for Senator
Yeah.
Goldwater, saying, I'm about to take the government down, basically at the
Yeah.
White House.
Right. Right. Yeah.
What do I do? And evidently, he says, it's one of the clips I'm going to put on my website. Evidently, Goldwater shouted to Barry Goldwater Jr., "Get me a drink I need before you go any further. I need a big shot of something." And that he listened all the way through and then
Yeah.
told him, you go tell the truth about that
Yeah.
SOB.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're going to have to do a synopsis of what you just described, the Vietnam War and how do we get out of it?
Hmm.
How did that change? Because it did.
Yeah. Yes, it did. It changed because of the Watergate Committee. That's how it changed.
And heeding the truth, right?
Yeah, that's how it changed. There's
Yeah.
no question about that. That committee did the country, the nation a huge, huge service. And there's been nothing like it that I can recall in the years since. Um, Everybody did their patriotic duty. They
Mhm.
put country over party.